Hello, everybody. Welcome back. The Indiana Sports Beat coming to you here. Sammy Jacobs joining us now from Hoosier Huddle. Sammy, we were at Big Ten Media Days Thursday and Friday in Indianapolis, which that was great in and of itself. Being at Media Days was great in and of itself. The environment was fantastic. Everybody seems to have a little pep in their step. This environment has helped with that, but getting back to people where you can see people and touch them, and well, you don't touch them, but you know what I'm saying. It's awesome, really. It feels like you've been let out of a cage.
Yeah, it's it's kind of back to normal. Of course, you still have questions about COVID and vaccinations and those things, but it seems like we're trending in the right direction, and it's refreshing.
And that's important for these teams because we saw last year all over sports, not just in football, but guys go down at the wrong time. And this year they've said there's not going to be makeups. You're forfeit. So you got to be prepared. Indiana's team is, I think, 91% vaccinated. They said this morning on the show or earlier, Indiana's in a good position that way. IU is requiring vaccinations. So that should take care of that. I think that I don't know about the rest of the schools, but Indiana's good in that regard. Health-wise, you just got to worry about Michael Penix.
It seemed the one thing I was disappointed at this week was Kevin Warren's lack of a COVID policy. He was asked about it yesterday, and he basically said we don't have one yet.
But are you surprised by that?
I shouldn't be. Look, I've worked in enough schools where people who you think would have to be organized aren't. No, but I'm still disappointed in it. Like, look, the NFL came out and said that they're going to forfeit games. I think that's the right choice. It's a competitive advantage now to get vaccinated, and there's something on the line. And look, I feel very strongly about that topic, but we're here to talk sports. So we'll see. There's no wiggle room in the schedule. They're not going to redo the schedules. They're not going to postpone games and make them up. So, let's say, for example, if Ohio State has to forfeit a game, that could wreck their season. Or Alabama or Clemson or one of these teams who's vying for a conference title, a college football playoff berth, and things like that. If you only play 10 games and you forfeit 2 of them, is the college football playoff committee going to say, oh, well, they have to forfeit, those losses don't really count? There's a lot of questions still to be answered, but I like having the accountability part there.
Yeah, there was last year. We go back to last year, the deal with the Ohio State where they kind of wobbled back and forth and ended up putting Ohio State in, which I'm not saying it was the wrong thing to do. It was just how they went about it, exactly with what you're talking about, the lack of transparency, the communication from the Big Ten it's just been pretty poor since Kevin Warren assumed that rule. I'm not here to bang on him, but hey, he's the top guy, and I have not been impressed with what he's done, to be honest with you. Talk about what you just mentioned earlier. You would think after having this much time, something big like that, you would be prepared.
Well, he came out and said he had no regrets on how he handled 2020, which, if you want to take responsibility for something and say, we could have handled it better, because the Big Ten could have handled it better. He did cite that there were the ways he went about communicating. He probably would have made the same decisions anyway. We could go back and forth on the Ohio State thing. Look, Ohio State beat Indiana, but they did not meet the required number of games played, and changing that rule or that guideline in the middle of the game, I thought was kind of bogus. Not kind of bogus, very bogus. It's like if you're playing Monopoly in the middle of the game, you go, oh, you know what? Now free part. I landed on free part. Now
I get all your money.
Now it's I get all your money and things like that. And it would have been interesting in hindsight had Wisconsin been have a 1 loss or be undefeated and things like that. Would they have done it for Wisconsin? Would they let Nebraska play? Or
would they have done it for Indiana?
They didn't do it for Indiana. So
question answered.
It's I thought he speaks very well. He's very charismatic. The substance was not there for me yesterday.
Yeah, and hopefully they can pick that up. Hopefully the season takes care of that, that we don't have tons of issues to deal with. And let's talk about the season. Man, its expectations are high, very high, higher than they've ever been. Indiana, there's never been any expectations for Indiana football. There's never been really any reasons for there to be expectations. Well, they're there in abundance now, which is good and bad. But it's good because that means you're doing what you're supposed to do on the field. I know Tom Allen wants those expectations. That's where he wants to be. But I'm really looking forward to that first game. And I know you can't go too far past it, but there is a lot to look forward to. Iowa, Cincinnati, Ohio State coming in. There's just so many great storylines to look at, but they all start at Iowa opening the season, which it was odd. Kirk Ferentz talked, this is the first time since 1979 they've opened with a conference opponent. This is the second time Indiana's done it in 4 years. And ironically, it was against Indiana in '79.
Yeah, and I believe Indiana opens up in the next few years. They open up either with Northwestern at home, then they open up with another Big Ten opponent down the road in 2023. So it's, I don't know the rhyme or reason how they do it, why they do it, but it's just like 2017. It's a chance to get off to a hot start, and you're going into Kinnick Stadium. That's going to be a hostile environment to play. It's going to be a raucous crowd. It's the first time that Iowa fans are going to be allowed back in the stadium. So people are going to be well lubricated, excited, and ready to go. And I know that there's a pretty big Indiana contingent going out there as well, at least from what I've seen on social media. They'll be ready to go. But you're going to face a nationally ranked Iowa team. It's a chance to get the season off on the right foot. Now, it's not going to be a season ender if you lose. And going back to the expectations, you have to have realistic expectations. Like anything in life, you have to have realistic expectations. Because if you set your expectations way too high and don't achieve them, it's terrible for morale. And B, you're going to look at yourself as a disappointment. You look at the Yankees, for example. They have not had a losing season since 1991. But those aren't the expectations. The expectations is to win it all. And, when I was younger, that's great. But, now as a teacher and some other things, you got to find your wins and have reasonable expectations as well. So what are my expectations for Indiana this year? Get to a bowl game and win a bowl game. It's not, the next step isn't to beat Ohio State, in my opinion. The next step is to win a bowl game, end that streak, because the last 4 bowl games, Indiana could have won.
Should have won 3 out of 4, to be honest with you.
Should have won 4 out of 4. Utah was a very winnable game, too.
That's true. But that ended up being like a 2-point game.
It was, it was a 2-point game. They lost by 3 to Duke on a field goal that was
bad call.
The fact that wasn't reviewable is ridiculous. On a terrible call and a terrible policy. Utah, if the offense did anything, you beat Utah there. Of course, you have Tennessee. You doinked an extra point. You miss a field goal. You misplay an onside kick as well. And then the bowl game last year, which, you got hung up with COVID at the end of the year. And who knows how many guys missed
coaching changes.
And that happened against Tennessee as well. But, you scored 20 points against a team that's defense was, pretty bad in the SEC. You held Ole Miss well below their season average on offense. But, you're playing with a quarterback who separated his shoulder in the first quarter, and the offense couldn't get it going. So arguably they could be 4-0. I think that's the expectation. If your expectation is Indiana has to beat Ohio State, look, Ohio State has like 7 losses in the last decade in conference. It's just that's a tough expectation to have and then to overachieve it.
And there's a lot of those that Indiana has to break through. It's not just Ohio State. That's one of the top. They start at Iowa. That's a team that Indiana has kind of risen to their level and over the years and kind of dropped back and forth. But Iowa has just, I've said it all day, one of the most consistent programs in all of college football. And going there, it's one of those classic college football environments. 80,000 great college football fans. It's like
my
Nebraska.
favorite road. It's my favorite road trip.
It's just those places are just great. They're Nebraska, Iowa. Those old school fans, they're welcoming. They're great environments. It's not a. It's a good place to go.
Yeah, and it's my favorite road trip to go to. The tailgating's outstanding. It's Labor Day weekend. The weather should be. I probably just jinxed it. The weather should be fine, and things like that. But it's Iowa was always kind of you wanted Indiana to get to Iowa's level, and Iowa, they bounce between 4 wins and 10 wins, but they live at 6, 7, 8 wins.
They live going to a bowl game.
Yeah, and you have those outlier years where you compete for a conference title, or you have heavy losses to the NFL and graduation, and you slide back to 4 or 5 wins.
Indiana is in position to have a historic season, as we've said. Winning is what it's going to take, and that starts at Iowa. But you've also got a challenge at Michigan, a team that is not as good as Indiana, but you add 110,000 people, and that's a 13th man, and it's going to make it difficult for the offense. But they've been there and been close before, never with the team that they have this year, though. This all things being equal, they're on both sides of the ball. Indiana is pretty balanced and better than Michigan on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, you talk about Michigan. I don't think Indiana's won up there since
67.
67. And then you also look at a trip to Penn State. Indiana's never won at Penn State. But going to Michigan, you play them late in the year. I think it's November, sometime in November. But Michigan they could either be really fired up, or they could be, that's ship sinking. Because you saw it last year. They didn't perform well. They redid Jim Harbaugh's contract, where the buyout is not that much this year. And if they're having another middling season, that fan base is done. And it's going to be super quiet. They're not going to spend the money to go and things like that. But if they're in the middle of a good season, getting ready for Ohio State, it's always a bear to go up there.
We didn't come on here to talk Michigan football, but it's got, man, for Jim Harbaugh, that's got to be just a hard pill to swallow. Going to your alma mater and the success that he's had coaching, he's been a successful coach, but he can't get it done to the level of their expectations there, and that involves beating Ohio State, which he hasn't been able to accomplish. But now during that time, Ohio State's become a juggernaut. But
it's
arguably
used to be. Ohio State's probably as good as they've ever been, arguably. So you're coming in at a time when Ohio State is historically good, and you're trying to rebuild a Michigan program where if you keep getting blown out, patience dwindles and things like that. And this is the year, if you're going to get Ohio State as Michigan, this is the year to do it. Now, whoever the starting quarterback is, it looks like it's C.J. Stroud for Ohio State. They're going to be seasoned by the end of the year, but it could. This is the year to do it. And same goes for Indiana. You get Ohio State
midway through the
season. It sets up similar to where it was in 2015. Especially if they can't figure out the quarterback situation in Columbus. This is as good of a chance as you're going to get Ohio State until maybe for another 3 or 4 years until they go through another quarterback change.
And to give you an indication of how hard it is to do what Tom Allen has done, look at Jim Harbaugh. He's Michigan. The recruiting power that Michigan still has. They still have recruiting power because it's Michigan. But they have not been able to get it to where Indiana is. I mean, they're still trying to get there, which it's hard to imagine I'm saying those words, but it's the truth. And that shows you how difficult all work out, and it hasn't for them yet. If it does, maybe it does, but that's the difficulty in it. And you've got a program like Michigan. If it's tough there, well, how the hell hard was it at Indiana?
Yeah, and I go back, final thing on Jim Harbaugh. I think you're going to see if Joe Milton goes down to Tennessee and tears it up in the SEC, I think that's going to be an indictment on on that offensive staff in Michigan. You brought in a quarterback who was supposed to be pretty good. He bottomed out, but he went to a new staff. They developed him. Time will tell, but you got to develop those. You could get all the 5 stars in the world. If you're not developing them, it doesn't matter. I mean, you might finish with 6 wins just based on talent alone, but teams like what Indiana's done with Tom Allen and developing players, those 3-star, 4-star guys are going to beat an undeveloped 5-star guy.
Absolutely. What are you looking for other than kickoff starting out? What are you looking forward to?
It's just getting rid of baseball season.
That's the Yankees suck. Well, the Reds they've been heartbreaking as well. So
what I'm looking forward to is Indiana showing the fans how far they've come.
And Indiana's fans back.
Yeah,
great
and
point
Indiana having fans back and rewarding those guys who have been in the stands day in and day out for the last 30 years, through all the good times, the highs, the lows, the unbearable lows, the bad weather. But I think you built up a lot of equity with the fan base the last couple of years, and now it's time to reward them, and the fans need to reward the team as well. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited for the whole thing. I'm ready for college football.
Me too, man. I'm excited to keep going, and we'll do more. We'll be back with more on Indiana Sports Beat right after this.